I call to order the work session of the Board of School Trustees. It's 6:01 p.m. and our first the purpose of interviewing candidates for an open school board position. And we'll first start with Jean Fredette. Let's introduce ourselves around the table, if you would, even though I've already gone the opposite way than I said I would. Go ahead.
I am Rachel Witt, Jean Drewer.
Ryan Bittner.
Karen Springer.
Alan Carping.
Brad Marley.
Tom, so you know most of us there. So, Tom, we're going to let you lead off the question. And one thing we will do, we have about 25 minutes for the interview.
Okay.
And we'll make sure that we leave you time to ask questions at the end.
Okay.
And then we'll discuss the process after that. So, Tom, go ahead.
Start real easy. What brings you here tonight? What's your interest in, besides working with these illustrious people, what brings you to be a candidate for the school board position?
So I brought my notes because I didn't want it to be like a doctor's appointment when I walk out and think, you know, I wish I would have said that. So, but okay. So, so I was thinking a lot about that question. So it might be a little long-winded, but I think I have to go back to when I graduated from Purdue. I went to Purdue for my bachelor's and master's, and got my degree in speech pathology. And I knew from the beginning that I wanted to work in the schools. And in speech, I think it's probably still similar, but at that time, really, I think I was the only one who went into the schools. All of my other fellow students went into rehab settings, hospitals, etc. But I felt like, you know, this is something I was meant to do, was to work in the schools. And since that time, I think that feeling has been reinforced. Since I've left the schools as well. So at my time working in the schools, working with graduate students at Purdue in speech and mentoring them, those students who are learning to be speech pathologists, and then just personally teaching religious education and things like that. So when the vacancy became open, so I never contemplated, you know, sitting here. But I thought about it for a long time, and I thought, you know, maybe this is my opportunity in a different way, in a new way, to be able to touch children, give back to the community, and just in a way that I hadn't thought about. So maybe this is it. I don't know. So.
Okay. Thank you.
We're doing one at a time, right?
Right, one at a time. That's correct. Go ahead, Brad.
What's your view of public education's purpose?
Well, I think that, I mean, I went to the public schools, you know, I've worked in the public schools, my husband has worked in the public schools, so I'm a very strong supporter of public education. And I feel like that I have things that I'm passionate about in public education, and one of them is this all students being able to reach their potential or their ability. And you know, I don't know if, for me, my passion is students with special needs, and I feel very strongly about that. I'm really interested in that, and I think public education is a place where those, you know, we can meet the needs of those children, you know, in a special way, and that doesn't always happen in other educational settings. So, and that, I think that can be, you know, challenging. We have to take diligence with those children, but you know, that, I guess that's, you know, my special view of, you know, but if overall, making sure that each child works to his or her potential.
Thank you.
Tell me something. You have an accomplished resume and have done many things from what you've given us. But tell us something. Tell us a story about something that you've done that you really are most proud of.
Okay. I think probably. Boy, that's a tough question. So I swam at Purdue, and I was a student athlete there for 4 years, and I came as a walk-on, And that was, I did not know what I was getting into. That was like, wow, this is serious business here. And I remember calling home and saying, like, I already bought my parka. I remember it was $106. I wrote the check. I thought, well, I can't quit now. I just bought this swimming parka, you know. So, and then it is, you know, so I kept going. But, you know, I think that's like one of those times it's like makes you or breaks you, you know. But then my junior and senior year, I was voted co-captain. And I was really, that's something I was really proud of. Because I was not a scholarship athlete, and I felt like, you know, I had earned the respect of my teammates, and that was a big thing for me. So.
Good.
Can you describe your personal experience and involvement with the West Lafayette Community School Corporation over the past 5 years?
Sure. Okay, so I have a 6th grader and a 3rd grader, Happy Hollow in Cumberland, and I have been, so when I resigned from Benton County to stay home with my children, and I feel I've had 2 like very different experiences with both boys, and I feel like that's a real blessing. My older son, things, you know, come very easily for him, and my younger son has to work really hard. So I really have taken upon myself that, and for both of them, but especially for my younger son, to be involved in the schools. So, you know, at Cumberland, I have done for the past, like, this is my 4th year working in the library, and volunteering in there. For all of my younger son's teachers, since he's been at Cumberland, once a week I go in and ask, or like one afternoon a week, I'd say to the teacher, what do you have for me that I could do for you? Whether it's copying, laminating, binding, to help that teacher. I'm a chairperson for the library birthday party at Cumberland, for them to get new books. I do popcorn days at Happy Hollow, and which raises money for the student council. I'm volunteering there, which is always interesting watching lunchtime. You really gain a lot through that. So what else? I don't know. Tallman Mile I've been a part of. Those are the things off the top of my head, but those are things on a regular basis that I have done with. So I've enjoyed it. It's really, I feel like as a parent, you know, when I'm involved, when I'm in the schools and working within, I feel like I get a real sense of the culture of the school and what's happening, and as opposed to, you know, I suppose, you know, being a parent and a child, you know, attending the school, it's a different perspective.
Okay. Thank you.
Brian?
What's the biggest issue, in your opinion, facing West Lafayette schools? And can you offer any solutions?
That's a good question.
All right.
Just talk for the rest of the, yeah.
We're ready now.
For just specifically for West Lafayette schools?
Yeah, what do you feel is the biggest challenge facing us maybe in the next 3 to 5 years? And what solutions might you have?
Okay. Well, I guess it's a two-part question, I guess. I don't know if it's necessarily West Lafayette necessarily, but I have a strong view of the standardized testing. You know, so that's just not West Lafayette, but you know, it does affect us hugely. You know, that I think it takes so much time away from teachers, so much time away from students, and as a speech-language perspective, you know, we know that students learn from experiential learning, hands-on learning, and teachers can't do that. So that's from my professional. And on a personal note, I was one of those people that worked really hard in school got very good grades, and I did so poor on standardized testing. So that is I took the GRE, then for my graduate school, took the prep course, and then did worse the second time. So anyway, but specifically, I don't know if it's something that needs to be, to do better. Let me check something right here. Necessarily, we need to do a problem, but I think we can always improve on, and I think that would be working with special needs students. I think there's always special challenges with that, and regards to instruction, teaching strategies, identifying them, and getting them the services they need. So from my professional background, I feel like that's something. And I know West Lafayette, their hallmark is academic excellence. So bringing everybody to work through their potential is something that I guess I've already said I feel strongly about, but in my eyes, as a parent and having two children with different, seeing, I can only see this, I see the schools through them, and their experiences. So.
Okay, thank you.
You might be shocked to know that occasionally a patron will approach you as a school board member with comments or questions. How do you deal with that? If they have a particular problem in the school, what would be your response to them?
I guess I think that you have to have open ears and listen, because I think, there's so many sides to the story a lot of the time. So open ears and listening to what their ideas are and things are, and then I guess coming to the group and talking and having discussion about what's being said and what you're hearing from the community. I guess I'm assuming that all of you bring different strengths and ideas and things, and you talk and have discussion. But when you go out, it's one message and a clear message. So I don't know. Since I haven't been in that position, I guess that's a little challenging for me to answer. But listening, being a good listener, and listening to all sides, and
Thanks.
Thank you. Tom?
You talked about your many involvements, which is great. We all thank you for that because the schools need parent volunteers. If appointed, would you see yourself maintaining that, cutting back, adding to it, and why, or why would you make whatever decision you would make?
I think that I'd have to make priorities, as to what, maybe I can be involved, but I don't have to chair something, and find the balance that it is. I mean, I purposely don't have a permanent work position so that if things, opportunities such as this, arise, that I can take advantage of them, and I can still do what I need to do for my family and do other things, that I want to do. So obviously this would be, one of the top priorities rather than, I still want to keep, involved in a way, but finding the balance and making a priority of those.
If you were appointed to the West Lafayette Community School Corporation Board of Trustees, what would you do over the next year as a new school board member? What would you expect to do and be involved with? And I think it's a reaction to the job your first year is what we're looking for.
Meaning, how would I react if I?
What would you do, or how would you respond if you were appointed to the board?
Okay.
Your first year.
Okay. Well, I think the first year I think would be, education and learning, what is, what else I need to know more about going on in public education that I already know, the issues, the things that are facing, West Lafayette specifically, I guess for me would be gaining more knowledge, and then kind of being a new member, taking your lead. And I have to say, in my past, I'm more of somebody who takes in information and, thinks on it and takes some time to think it over. And I'm not necessarily somebody to jump in right away. I was on a committee with athletics for 4 years, and I think that's kind of how I took it. And I think it worked when I thought about it. It was actually not. It was kind of similar in a way, I think that's kind of how I did it there.
Thank you.
Can you describe a decision or a situation you were in where you were involved, or you were involved with, I should say, that turned out to be a failure?
Yeah, I think I think I was a part of a situation that was well, let me think about which situation I'd like to talk about.
And let me also
I had multiple failures,
and also, what was your reaction to it, too, is probably the best follow-up there, too. So
Okay.
How'd you deal with that?
Okay. So I was originally part of a committee that it was more challenging and than I had anticipated, and I think there was a breakdown in communication, and it was between the group, and it was really disappointing. It was kind of just disheartening, I guess, and I thought the way that the process went, and I didn't think it was as fair as I had thought it was going to be. It was like, oh, I guess things do happen like this. Mm-hmm. So it took me some time, really, to decide, do I still want to be a part of this? And I thought, I do, because if I leave this, then it's not right. And so I just thought, we're going to make this right, and we're going to do things to move forward as we're going to get the more information we need. We need to work as a team, and we need to communicate better. And we had a meeting about how we can communicate better and how we're going to move forward, and so that it didn't happen again.
Karen?
If appointed to the school board, do you see this as a short-term or a long-term commitment for you?
Well, I think, am I correct that there's 1.5 years left on the vacancy?
That is correct.
Okay.
A little bit less than that, but yes.
I mean, I'm interested in education. I mean, all the things that education and things stand for, I am interested and passionate about. So, there's, things you can't foresee, I feel like, and obviously you want to go through it, and then as you're going through and you come to the time in 1.5 years and think, is this what I'm called to be doing? Or is this, am I making the contribution that I need to? Am I doing what I need to do as my part? But I foresee, I guess all I can say is that I would hope it would be, give as long as I can and contribute to the time period, as long as I could, because it is definitely something that I'm interested in and passionate about.
Right? Yeah, good.
If the superintendent came before the board and wanted approval on an item which you didn't agree with, how would you handle that?
Well, I would think that we would have discussion as a group and come to a consensus, because it would be a group decision that we would need to talk and discuss, or is that kind of how, I guess, if we, that's kind of what I'm thinking, that, but I mean, there's ways to work together. I don't know if you find compromise, or you work on things, there's going to be disagreements sometimes. And I mean, I know just working in school buildings and things that happens. So, but I think there's always a time and place you can work together and, either find a compromise or find, ways to work together.
Okay. Rachel, last question.
Can you give your explanation of how the board works, what the board's role is in the school corporation? Did you understand it?
And I would understand it. I would think that that the role of the board would to do everything possible to help our children fulfill the mission statement of the corporation. Which I would think would be involved supporting the teachers and administrators, providing the educational programs, setting the policies, and having discussion and conversation to on what is the best interest for the students. I would also think that that the board is a liaison between the public and the school corporation to convey accurate information about what is being incorrect information, I guess. I felt like that on the committee I served with athletics. I was the alumni representative, and it was kind of like Morgan might say, this is something that people need to know, the John Purdy Club does not receive any state funds, and that we need to, and so I was the alumni, so whether I was in public or, these are correct information needs to be out there. So I think in a similar way that the message needs to be accurate and clear, and so I guess communication would be another thing.
We've got about 5 minutes or so. Questions for us that we can answer for you. And we don't have to use all 5 minutes, I'm just saying.
You can talk about the weather if you want.
Try not to make it harder than it is. Jean, you'll have to sit there. Go ahead.
It's sweatier. And I am curious about the different committees that all of you are involved in, and how that works, and how you're assigned, and.
Right, we have probably about 15, I'm guessing, total committees, of which every board member typically is on anywhere from 2 to 3 committees throughout as part of your boardsmanship, and that doesn't that may vary slightly, and and some of these committees, whether it be negotiations, discussion, foundation, there's a whole wide array of them. And some of them meet monthly, some of them meet quarterly, some meet, for example, with the negotiations, meet when we have negotiations. So you'll have an expectation to be on a committee. And one of the things that we find is very, very important to us, and we kind of keep track of making sure that there are times when we have 2 people on a particular committee, so that if you can't be there, we at least have someone there as much as humanly possible. But yeah, there's an expectation to serve on committees. And there may be some that we also have, for example, a facilities committee right now where we're studying the potential facilities upgrades at the school, and we have board members that are assigned to that. That wouldn't be something of our regular committee, but it's an important part of what we do, and a great way for you to be able to get out and meet more people and interact with, whether it be teachers, administrators, stakeholders. That's a great chance to do that. I answered the question, I hope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there anything else? Any answer for you? And let me just explain about the process. We are interviewing 4 candidates tonight. We will have a vote next Wednesday at our regular board meeting, which is September the 9th. And then we will come back and make an appointment at that point in time. And then the person that is selected will be sworn in, assuming that that person's available on that date. But the plan is on September the 10th to have that person sworn in. And then the process too is that we do have board training You're not left out there to fend for yourself, whether it be with Dr. Killian, or whether it be with our financial people. You'll also be with somebody on the board to kind of give you the lay of the land of how to do this. And I think that can be a very useful experience for you as you enter into that. So, anything else I didn't answer on that part, Rocky? Anything else from anybody else? Gene, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Gene.
Thanks.
so
Take
much.
care.
This way.
Okay, this one. All right, thanks, Dr. Flynn.
You're welcome.
All right.
We will have
Thank you very much.
9 minutes, 8 minutes and 45 seconds to hang out, or whatever we need to do.
If you need to take a break, this
Yeah.
is the time. Dr. Johnson. We're going to get you started. Everyone, Dr. Richard Johnson, this is the
Hello.
school board.
Hello, Rachel.
Hello. Hi, Alan. How you doing?
Hello, how's it going, Tom?
Do you know everyone in the room?
No, we've met, I know at some point, but I don't know these two, so.
Yeah. I've seen you from a distance, but I've never
Yeah.
heard. But nice to see you again. We're going to give you the. We will go around the horn and ask questions of you, obviously, since this is an interview. That would make sense. And we'll have the opportunity to also kind of go probably 2 rounds of questions, and then give you time to ask any questions that you might have on the back end. And then at the end, after we answer questions, we'll also explain the process to you in terms of the timetable, which has already been kind of out there publicly, but if you have any questions about that. And we'll go ahead and start with Tom. Why don't you go first?
Just very generally, what brings you here tonight? What's your interest in being on the school board?
Well, I've always been interested in being on the school board, but, the timing never seems to work out, so you look in the newspaper and there's been a vacancy, and you're like, all right, this looks like the time. I mean, I'm a full professor at Purdue, so the only promotion I have from here is to be retired and get the emeritus. So it's kind of, so it looked like a good time to, maybe try, add something. I do a lot of volunteer work, and so this would be something I've always been interested in putting some time into. So I guess that's it,
Good enough.
Okay. Brad?
What's your view of public education's purpose?
Well, I mean, I think, going back, into the 19th century, public school is frankly what makes the United States what it is today. I mean, it'd be hard to, in fact, that's kind of what separates us in a lot of ways, our economy. Everything from setting up public schools in the early 19th century to, land-grant universities like Purdue. So it would be, basically that's what distinguishes, I think, a democracy from other kinds of governments. And I guess I should even go back. I teach classical rhetoric, so I always got to mention Athens at some point. But they had a somewhat public education for their students too. So, and I think that's what made them a great nation also. So it's this is something that allows you to lift up your economy, lift up how people, get ahead in the world and things like that. So I'm a fan, just to put it simply.
Thank you.
Tell me something that you've done throughout your life, doesn't have to be a professional life, that you're really extremely proud of, and tell us the story behind that.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you that I come from a pretty working class family. That always surprised me. I mean, knowing the first time I showed up on a college campus was when I showed up at Iowa State and went to college. So, so no one on either side of my family had ever not only been to college, but even, been on a college campus. So that's, and to go from there to getting a PhD, is quite the quantum leap, if I can put it that way. So I guess that's it. I mean, I got to tell you that when I showed up at college, I really had no idea what was going on. In fact, my dad and I remember when we went to orientation. This is why I always go see orientation at Purdue. But we drove into campus, we were like, what are all the buildings for? Where's the college? So I guess that's it. It's still kind of a strange thing. Is my family's still mostly factory workers, carpenters. A few of my cousins have gone to college, but but they still don't understand what I do, but they assume it's important, so, but, they're producers, and, they're people that make things with their hands, and so, that's something that they don't see me as quite doing until I show them one of my books. They're like, oh, you made this, okay, that makes sense to them, so I guess that's something I'm proud of.
Sure. Okay.
Can you describe, please, your personal experience and involvement with the West Lafayette Community School Corporation over the past 5 years?
Yeah, I try and do that, in my letters. Of course, my kids go to school here, still in the junior and senior high, so my daughter's a sophomore and my son's in 8th grade. So I've been involved in the things they're involved in. I do a lot of sports coaching, as Tom knows, and lately umpiring, which he can say whether that was a good foray into. But so I get yelled at about that.
You only threw me out of a couple of games.
What's that?
You only threw me out of a couple of games.
Yeah, I know. So those are the kinds of things. I'm usually involved in those kinds of things. My volunteer work is usually more with conservation issues and hunger. I do a lot with food finders, specifically through my church, and we do. And then I was one of the founders of Go Greener Commission. That's not with the school, but these things hook up with the school. We've done things with students with their eco club here through things like the Go Greener Commission and things. So it's kind of that, and then so those kind of been the ways that I've been involved. One last thing is most people see me picky at my kids, so I'm the crazy guy yelling at people speeding up and down Grant Street. I shouldn't say I'm that bad, but basically I'm telling people slow down because there's no crossing guard there at Jefferson. So that's how most people seem to know me. They're like, you're the guy that's always waiting out there. It's, that's because my kids are going to get killed going across the street on that day.
What is the biggest issue, in your opinion, facing West Lafayette school system, and what solutions, if any, do you have?
Yeah, this one's an obvious one. It's teacher retention and recruitment. I think we all know about the crisis. We see, we're seeing baby boomers retiring, basically. That was a large generation of teachers that went through. We're seeing a lot of new young teachers coming in, but I'm also seeing those folks kind of get here, spend a couple of years, and then start looking for something else. So it's going to be retention. And, I think I think it's going to be a matter of convincing them that this is a great place to live. It's not just a place to start, but, it's a university town. We've got great kids here. This is a great place to not only just get going, but also, put down roots, maybe have kids of their own, have families, and stick around for a while. I think millennials that are coming into the workforce right now are a little looser about how they think about finding a job and a place to settle down. So it takes a little more persuading than maybe it did previous generations. So I think that's our biggest issue that we're facing. So.
There will be times, if you're applying to the school board, that patrons will come up to you and have something they want to talk with you about.
Sure, I hope so.
So how do you deal with that?
I think you listen and never make any promises. I think that's what you do. Hopefully this is a listening board more than, saying, okay, I'm going to go get something done about that. Rather bring it to the board, talk it through. I think that's what's really critical, is that you're not telling people things are going to get done, because, that's not in the power of one person on this board. They're going to have to, so I think that's something that we all talk about, and try and do that. But that said, if it's a good thing, it's a good idea, I wouldn't mind advocating for those things, bring that to the board and get it done if we can, so.
Thank you.
What does our mission statement mean to you? And you're welcome to refer to the board. If you,
Yeah, I was reading this, so, I picked up on the word innovative quite a bit, because I teach, I teach, communications basically, and I've been shifting and talking a lot more about leadership and stuff like that. And I think innovation, entrepreneurship, adaptive citizens, these are all important things that we're trying to get into our students. I'm a little worried that sometimes the way we're assessing them is trying to assess them on things like, did you get the math problem right, or did you know this little fact or something, and that's not preparing them to be what I'd say are leaders necessarily. Those things are important, I don't, that's not, that's not what I'm saying, but rather teaching them to be creative, innovative, entrepreneurial thinking at all times. So that's, those are the kinds of, those are the sparkle words in the mission statement that I pick up on, and that I'd actually think we could do a better job at pushing forward, despite, the pushing down of assessment. I'd say rudimentary forms of assessment. As I said in my letter, I teach assessment. It's always this kind, I'm almost ashamed to call some of this real assessment, because it's just testing, it's not assessment, but that's, that's how that mission statement reflects some of that, so.
Good, thanks.
If you were appointed to West Lafayette Community School Board, what would you hope to accomplish in the first year?
Wow, just kind of understanding what the real issues are. I think I have a sense of what the issues are just from talking with different instructors and parents and things like that. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be too aggressive pushing things right off the top, and that seemed rather audacious. And like I said, I think some of the obvious things we need to do about things like retention and recruitment are things that I would like to be involved in right away. And then other issues, down the road, I think, for example, I think another non-secret is that our buildings are reaching the end of their life cycle, at least Happy Hollow is. And the high school is probably on the horizon. As I'm seeing the economy picking up, this is a good time to start, advocating for that before the cycle goes down again. So that would be kind of a second thing that I'd start thinking, maybe we need to start advocating for those. Not that it magically happens in a few years. That's why you have to, I know it's already been in play. It's just that that's something we push along as the state budget perhaps looks a little healthier, and maybe some funds come our way.
I'm going to start, just as a follow-up to a question on retention and recruitment, what specific areas, why would this be at West Lafayette an attractive place, and in terms of should we have a problem with retention and recruitment in West Lafayette?
Yeah, you wouldn't think we'd have a problem, but like I said, we've already seen, just a couple of younger teachers just kind of bail out us on this summer even. I don't know why, I'm just saying that, we didn't retain those folks. I think other states are already starting to perhaps offer more money, and so Indiana's going to kind of get into it. If it's a matter of driving across to Illinois or going to Ohio, they may decide that, well, my family's there, I'll move and get some extra money. I think that, this is a great environment for young faculty with Purdue being right here. But that said, we still have to make those pathways available to them and show them. West Lafayette may not come to mind as a great place to live immediately. Once they're here, we have to kind of keep them thinking that it's a great place to live, which I think it is, So I know retention, it's unless you just throw money at people, but I think something too that this state, and coming from other places, I think there has to be more respect shown to our teachers, let's say, listening to them, getting what their opinions are, getting their views on things. And I think that would go a long way towards making these folks feel more welcome in the state and perhaps want to stay here. What I understand is that we tend to lose people to other states and bigger cities. They're not going to small town Indiana necessarily. So.
Okay. And then my question, other questions, can you describe the decisions you've made or a situation that you've been involved with that turned out to be a failure, and then how did you respond to that?
Oh, that's a really good question. I should have thought of that one myself. I've run large writing programs at major universities, okay, and so you make bad calls occasionally. You misunderstand what was going on in the classroom, you pull an instructor in, and have that discussion that they don't want to hear, and sometimes perhaps you overreact. I just finished running the writing lab too at Purdue, and it's just sometimes you make personnel decisions, sometimes you think you're seeing what's going on, and then perhaps you react in a particular way, and then you have to pull back. Those are the kinds of mistakes that I've made. And I don't know if they're big mistakes. They're just kind of part of managing people, that sometimes you react and you have to you have to basically step back. And that's what I've learned to do, I guess, is say, okay, I overreacted. No, I'm not a person that gets angry very easy, so it's kind of, so my overreactions probably look rather mild by most standards, but nonetheless, I think at that point you can say, I better see what we're dealing with here. Let's figure out a way forward in these ways. So,
Karen?
If appointed to the school board, do you see this as a short-term or a long-term commitment?
It could be either. I mean, it's a year and a half, I guess, that's left on this particular position. If it seems to be something that I'm making a good contribution to, I'd of course like to be long-term or longer term than a year and a half. If I don't feel like I'm being effective, then I'll let somebody else take the seat at that point. So my intention is to do long-term, but again, if I don't feel like I'm doing anything important, then I'll let someone else who feels like they can. So, unlike most politicians. In other words, I'll get out of the way if I'm not doing important things. So.
Describe what you'd do if the superintendent brought an item before the board for approval that you didn't agree with.
Well, I think that's kind of the job of the, I was going to say that the school board, I think, is on the side of the kids. Okay, that's really what its job is to be, is, something that, we see this at Purdue too, sometimes people make decisions about what's good for adults, and that's, and they think that assume that's what's good for kids. And I think it's a good idea for the school board to kind of keep looking at itself and saying, is this what's best for our kids in this school? And if we honestly say we don't think it is, then I think we have to frame it from that position, bring it back to the superintendent, say, we're kind of seeing this from a different perspective. Maybe we can do something a little different, So, I don't like getting into loggerheads. If people are acting in good faith, I think we can work things out. But at some point, that's going to be the key question: is this best for the kids and the adults, but not necessarily just the adults? So I guess that's how I try and respond to that.
Well, you kind of just answered the last
Oh, no.
question, just so you know. But I'll hop to
Now
one
you get a
that's...
freebie.
No such luck. I'll hop to a different one. What? Just going to take me a minute to hop to a different one. What authority do you think individual school board members have?
I think they have the authority to bring things to the board, but basically this is a democracy, not. In other words, I'm hoping people are bringing things to the board, and the board makes a collective decision, however its mechanisms are. So one board member, I can't just come in and say this is going to happen. It's kind of related to what we were talking about previously. In fact, I think it's best made if the board makes the decision together, rather than one individual going out and saying, this is what I think, and kind of keeping things in the room in some sense, and then coming out with a more unified voice. So I think that's the most effective way for groups like this to operate.
Other questions of anybody else here? Just tell us about what you like to do. Everyone, from a personal standpoint, you talked a little bit about that, but outside of academics, and if even so, we know that if you were on the school board, you would this would become your whole life. But somewhat facetious. But tell us about something that we wouldn't know, wouldn't think about you that's unique.
Yeah, well, my tan, no, it crazy, but I like to be outside. That's whether it's sports, whether it's hiking, whether it's being on the river, stuff like that. So I'm outside a lot, and, so I guess that's what I do a lot of, and even my own academics are a lot about outside issues for that reason. So I guess I must like to write a lot because I've published a lot. So it's so maybe that's the other thing that I do. I don't know how much back work you folks do. I have some of the major textbooks in two areas, and so so I spend a lot of time working on those, and I enjoy working on that as well as other projects. So.
questions for us? Anything we can answer for you?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I mean, I have a lot of experience in some things that I assume the school board would like. I mean, so I'll throw that one back. I mean, are there elements of what I do that would be attractive to the school board that you're like, well, he could bring this to our need, to what we do?
Speaking as one board member reading your resume, I would say that that certainly your commitment to your involvement in education and the fact that you're passionate about the job that you do and where you come from is certainly an asset. I mean, I think that's something that we expect here is it's pretty much of a team game. I think our group, and certainly we look and defer often to Dr. Killian, but we also as a group have to be committed to what we do and be passionate about it. And that can happen, and sometimes has to happen quietly, because it's not something that you usually walk down the street telling people that you're a school board member and you're the greatest because you're that. So that's an important part, I think, of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much, I know the I-STEP and other testing has been a bit of a shaky situation, and, I'll admit that I have a lot of expertise in assessment, what I'd say is real assessment. And is that something that would be valuable to the board, or is it kind of like, I-STEP's it, and that's how we're going to do things? There's a lot of other ways to do assessment in addition to I-STEP, in addition to what's being mandated. So.
Yeah, the problem we get into is the mandates from the state of having to do it and all the instructional time that we lose.
Sure.
So, right now my calculation is we're closing in on 3 weeks of losing instructional time throughout the school year for I-STEP that's mandated, and I've requested several times to get out of it.
Yeah.
We can't get out of it. So, I think, as you said, taking a test and assessments are two different things, and we'd love to create a parallel universe where we could create assessments that are meaningful and that measure student growth over time. We just have to figure out a mechanism that would allow us to do that.
Right.
And I think as a board members, part of our role is to be involved in that discussion. I mean, I think that Dr. Killian has been a leader in the state with that message, but we need to also understand and be able to toot the horn of what needs to happen, whether it be standardized testing, whether it be funding issues. That's why we try to work with our legislators as much as possible and make sure that voice is heard. So that's the collective voice of the board. And there are times that we will put resolutions together that something that we all believe in, because we are one voice, and that's an important part of this. But we have to do a good job of trying to make sure that our legislators, because as Dr. Killian said, that's what happens. Is the reality is you can say, well, we have no control over this. We don't, except for we have a superintendent that's been very, very vigilant and certainly have been on the doorstep of the State House many times, and we also are involved as a board to try to be leaders for change in that area. Anything else? Any other questions?
No, that's it.
The process will go, and you may have read that next week we will vote on the 4 candidates that we interviewed tonight, and in our regular board meeting next week. And once we make a decision on that as a board, then the following night we will swear that person in. So we will let that person following morning, excuse me. At 6 a.m. No, what time is that?
Yeah, right.
Well, whenever that individual would be
Excuse me,
available
our
in the
time.
morning.
So following morning, I said that, and so that we can fill the board position at the time that's allotted to us. So, anything else that we can answer for you? We thank you very much for your time, and we'll look forward to speaking with you further. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich.
Yeah.
Good seeing you.
Good. I'm going out this way?
No.
There was a labyrinthine description.
Yeah, I know. My writing isn't as good as yours.
We have time for
Oh, yeah. 7, we got 13 minutes. Anybody want to drink, guys?
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Water or something?
Exactly right.
Really fun time.
Everyone, this is Pamela Peterson.
Hello, how are you?
Right here.
Okay.
There's a water.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm glad you're here, and thank you again for taking the time to meet with us today. We're going to have a couple rounds of questions, and then and we may have some follow-ups to that, but hopefully we will give you time to ask questions of the board at the end. And then at the end also, we'll explain the process, over the next few days, how we'll make the determination of who will be filling the position. So we'll go ahead, and Tom, why don't you go ahead and get started.
You talked about it a little bit in your cover letter, but verbalize for us, if you would, just why you're here and what your interest in the school board position is.
Well, I have what I consider to be kind of an unusual educational experience background. It goes all the way from my K-12 education at Purdue a long time ago, on up to working with adult students, and now, of course, with the college-age students as well. And there's some international focus in there, which corresponds with one of your goals, or my goals too, world-class education, having been involved in the state of Indiana, working towards that, having worked with the technical vocational education and how we integrate that into our curriculum, having been a teacher and biting the bullet and going in there and putting my money where the mouth was, that was kind of an interesting thing. At age 50, kind of a brave thing to do. So I have that in my background as well, and then, of course, teaching in a university. So the depth and breadth of working with the BMWs and the international items in the state of Indiana, colleges, 2 and 4 in Indiana, having been a teacher, just feel like that's kind of a broad background. And so we come to this point in our lives, and I'm ready to give back and do something worthwhile with that can affect others and perhaps make a difference in our communities.
Thanks.
What is your view of public education's purpose?
Well, it's sort of like that adage, the rising tide raises all ships. That's sort of my attitude towards it. It's our responsibility as a community to make certain that we have really good education that not only teaches our kids how to get a job, keep a job, but also how to be a good citizen, the responsibilities that come with being an educated person and receiving that education within our public sector. I am a product of the public sector, although I have been on a board of a private school, which was an interesting experience for me. And I think that it's an obligation that we as taxpayers need to take very seriously.
Thank you.
You've had reading your resume and cover letter and all, you've done many things in your life and interesting things as well. Tell me, something that you've done that maybe you really are most proud of, and maybe explain the story behind that.
Well, that's a very easy question, but it doesn't go to specifically what we're looking for here tonight. I think my proudest thing is being a mother. My daughter is 32 and a good person, so I feel really pleased about that. So that would be easily, hands down, my best effort, if you will. But if we look at my background and my experience, my education, I think what I take away at the end of the day is that I've made a difference. I've made a difference to public school education at the high school level, as a volunteer, to the Girl Scouts, through various board activities, through my library volunteer work. I've made a difference based upon what I can offer. And I think that's probably something to be extremely proud of. How to reason, how to decision make, how to take risks. For example, today, one of my girls came to me and said, Miss P, I got to write a resume, what should I do, what should I do? And she told me what her goal was, and we went through what time period she needed to cover. And she was really down. She said, I haven't done enough, and it's not going to be good. And I said, yes, it is, because here are the things that you've been really good at. And listed getting into Purdue and academic excellence and the risk-taking and becoming a Greek. That's commitment and loyalty. and so on and so forth. So just being able to think clearly through those kinds of things is something to be proud of.
Can you describe your personal experience or involvement with the West Lafayette Community School Corporation?
Well, luckily, it's pretty objective. I think that even when I was at Purdue 1,000 years ago, when there were Brontosaurus on it, West Lafayette was looked at as an excellent school system. And I remember being pleased to do my exploratory teaching in a couple of the elementary schools here in town and thinking, cool. So from that early framing of reference, and then I've had a couple of friends that have been at West Lafayette School for years and years, and hearing from them, just as I've been in education all these years, and then I wanted to move here. Imagine being my age and moving here from Carmel, Indiana. A choice that I made consciously. So I have a lot of respect for it. I think it's a fine school corporation, and obviously it's award-winning and making a difference. So it validates that.
What is the biggest issue, in your opinion, facing West Lafayette schools, and do you have any solutions to maybe some of the challenges that we're going to have in the future?
I think, well, first let me say this. I read the minutes in the last 6 months, and I'm, as you might imagine from my resume, I'm very much interested in strategic planning, long-range planning, and how you've been really meeting your goals all along the way in that process. And I think following that process, you will be successful. I think some of the things that all educators have right now as a focus, what do we do with our facilities? How do we keep them up to date? How do we afford that? My gosh, how do we schedule all the things into our buildings that we as a community want to do? How do we fund this? Those issues are huge, and they're not even a specific educational goal. And then another one in the educational realm that I'm particularly interested in is how do we expose our children early on to international education and how Americans fit into the global society based upon not only our education, but our skills, our reasoning, and our ability to be a good world citizen. So those are some of the issues that I think come to mind immediately, would be the facilities on the one hand and the international education on the other.
You will, if you're appointed to the school board, periodically have patrons come up and want to talk with you about specific issues. How will you handle that?
With what I consider to be 2 ears and 1 mouth, keeping that in proportion. And I think I will handle it with a perspective that includes a slight sense of humor so that I don't take it so personally. And I'll listen and try to help them through identifying what the issue is, what can be done, what are their suggestions. Could you give me 3 possible situations that would address that situation? And then what would you like to see the ultimate outcome be? How can I help you achieve that? And so forth.
Can I ask one follow-up? And this, you commented as a positive that you're very objective, which I think is wonderful also, but how would you be accessible then to our patrons if you're not in schools or around schools, or say at the local football game? Would you modify that and start attending football? I mean, what's your plan?
Sure, absolutely. Just as I am at Purdue, I'm in a sorority house, but I'm on campus. I go to the events and the convos and that sort of thing. Sure, whatever volunteer activity that I take on, I become involved in if I haven't already been involved in the first place. Like the library and the events that go along with the library. I'm on the board at WALA, so I go to the events that have to do with WALA because I'm involved in that. So sure. And as a teacher at Carmel High School, I did that, and I know what they are.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
I'm curious about your experience on the board of council. What was that like?
It was very interesting. I was on the board at the time. It was called Orchard Country Day School. It's now called Orchard Day School. They took the country out. And in those days, it was in the 80s. My primary motivation was, at the time I was serving on a committee with the Lilly Endowment that had to do with with education. And one of the benchmarks that we were using in our research was the success that some private schools, non-religious private schools, were having in achieving various educational goals. And what did we as public want to do? Did it emulate that? Did it correspond with that? Was there some way we could make a transition, etc.? And I think that's what brought my interest into a private school in particular, having done that research. And so I wanted to walk the talk, if you will, and see what that was really like and how their admissions process really worked and how they determined grade level achievement for each child and where they went next and those kinds of things, comparing it to public education. And I thought it was very interesting because it showed me there's a difference in the populations, of course, but beyond that, there's a difference in the cultures of the parents. And how do we capture the enthusiasm of the parents from a private school into the public system? That's what I came away with.
I went to a public elementary school and a private high school, also a country day, so it was
There you go.
piqued my interest, so I understand.
If you were appointed to the West Lafayette Community School Corporation Board of Trustees, what would you hope to accomplish in your first year?
Well, first of all, I think I would like to become interested in one or two of your committees where I could actually get my teeth into it. The facilities long-range planning, I understand that you're going to be undertaking. Your long-range plan ends in 2016, so we're getting close. It's time to start that process again. I like that. I like to do research. I like to do evaluation. And so those are the kinds of things that I'd like to be able to sink my teeth into. And I think, given my background, together with being an educator, it would probably be an easier step to become involved in those kinds of activities rather than in the finance and fundraising, which I've not done.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can you just describe a situation that or a situation you've been in or have been involved in that turned out being a failure, and how did you respond to that?
Oh, I can think of two right off the top of my head that I felt that I personally failed. And I don't mean to laugh, because that certainly isn't a way to set the stage. When I was at Carmel High School, we had an interesting range of students that I think people who don't live in Carmel don't understand that there in Carmel we do have some extremely poor students and all the way up to the opposite end of the continuum. And so that mixture is interesting. And the way the kids react to it is interesting too, the dynamics of that. Well, I had a student who really had a lot of potential. I was interested in him because he had a lot of potential, and yet he came to class every day, and he didn't have a pencil, and he didn't have paper. He wasn't ready to take notes, but he could participate in discussions as if he had really gotten that in his head. And so I asked him one day, "What's your plan? What do you want to do?" And he said, "I don't have a plan. My parents don't have any money, and so I don't have a plan." And I said, "Well, maybe we could have your mom come in and talk about you and what your options are, and we'll bring somebody from the guidance office and talk about it." He said, "Oh, that'd be great. I'd love that if you'd do that. Would you please?" So we got it all set up. I was really excited. Counselor came. I had to get somebody to take over my class to sub for me for that period. I had all my stuff ready, all his grades and everything. His mother didn't show up. And so a little later on, I called her. And I said, "I'm so sorry. Did I mix up the times or the dates or something? Did I misunderstand?" And she said, No. I knew that you were having that, but that's when I got my tattoo. And it just made me crazy, that took priority over her son's future. And it gave me such an understanding of what he was coping with at home. I felt like it was partially my responsibility that I had raised expectations. And what I did then was follow through the counselor and try to get him involved through her and get the mother to come in that way. So, but that's one example of something that I would say was a failure. And yet, maybe in the end it wasn't. Maybe the boy did realize somebody had faith in him and somebody recognized that he had potential and he had talent and so on and so forth. So that's one of them that I lay awake at night and worry about. So I don't know that I would handle it any differently, but I always wondered what that tattoo looked like.
Yeah.
So important.
Yeah.
Yeah, Carmel High School. Didn't come to see the teacher, so you have a tattoo. Did that answer your question? Okay.
Go ahead, Karen.
If appointed to the school board, do you see this as a short-term or a long-term commitment?
Well, fulfilling the term would be a short term, but I don't see any reason why I wouldn't want to consider the next step.
Describe what you would do if the superintendent of schools brought before the board an item to be approved that you did not agree with.
Well, let me get a little background. Is this something that would have come through the committee system and we would have had a chance to discuss prior to that vote? That answer would be very different than if he just came forward on a particular night and said, here's what I want to do. That, the answer would be very different. If it's the latter, I think that I would suggest we certainly listen to it, and if it were up to me, but table any vote until we, as a collective, had an opportunity to discuss or look into or do research or whatever, unless it's something that is a routine event, and then I would say, sure, let's go ahead and do that. If not, let's table it and take it to committee and discuss it and do a little more looking into it.
What is your understanding of the role of the school board in the corporation?
The thing that I see, and this is from several standpoints, this is from the standpoint of a parent, the standpoint of a teacher, the standpoint of a fellow educator from university working, and so on and so forth. I see the role of the school board as interpreting the edicts, the rules, as put forward by the state of Indiana, so that those issues are addressed in a fashion that's appropriate for this particular area, this clientele, and what this clientele wants for its long-term goal. I think that all school boards in the state of Indiana have a responsibility, this collective responsibility, to respond to the Department of Education, but to do so with the respect and the understanding that they can interpret that slightly to meet their goals and do so rather than take it as an edict. Because typically, having worked with legislature for years, it's put out there as an ideal. And you take a look at it and you have ways that you can wiggle and make some interpretation, not altogether of course, but you have some ways that you can make some decisions. And then if it doesn't agree with this particular group, then I say, let's pursue that and ask the kinds of questions that are necessary to clarify where we're going and what it is we're doing, so that we're not just following an edict that maybe doesn't work for us.
Okay, thank you.
I'm interested in the issue, or your role with legislators. Expand on that in terms of your experience and what you have found to be real when being in that arena.
Oh, that was really a very interesting job. I was the director of the vocational education for the state of Indiana, so it put me in an interesting position. Vocational education was funded by the feds, but the money was matched as it came into the state of Indiana. And my role was to evaluate how well the state used the federal dollars. So it was really kind of, it wasn't a wash, in other words. It was very much to the question that Ms. Wood asked, very much to that question. And so I worked with the legislative study committees as they were crafting educational policy, or modifying it or tweaking it, and working as staff through legislative affairs and legislative services in providing data, what kinds of events might be successful translated into legislation. And then when that legislation was in the process of being written, there were several steps that it goes through with the legislators and then with their aides and then the the staff and so forth. And then there's opportunity internally for input into that as it comes about. So that when something is born and when something comes out, it's very different based upon all the input that has happened all along the way. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's awful. You know, it just depends what it is. So let me give you a specific example. Indiana wanted to beef up its vocational education, workforce education, big time. And so a resource was identified, and we were able to take 2 educators' trips to Germany, several sites in Germany, and this was before the ball came down, so that was very interesting, as well as the Netherlands. So that we had a look at what we look at from our point of view in those days, in the 80s and the 90s, would be a system that was very much ahead of us in terms of technical and vocational education. That trip included legislators, so that they were with us, state agencies, school teachers, etc., that were along on that trip. So they saw that, and it went through the strainer at the same time by listening to all of us talk after our sessions with the Germans or the Norwegians or whatever it was. And many of them, 2 of them in particular that were on my trip, Phil Warner, you may remember the name, from the northern part of the state, he's gone now, really felt as though he had had his eyes opened to the meaning of vocational education. It hadn't occurred to him that vocational education and workforce education were so closely parallel that they were one and the same. He thought of vocational education as he did at the time he went to Goshen High School, and then hadn't changed. And so that experience caused him to take a new look. And so then he was a real advocate when anything would be in legislative services. He was a real advocate for that. And then he would call on those of us that had been on the trip, Superintendent of Public Instruction, was Dean Evans at the time, Clyde Engel from the Commission for Higher Education at the time. He would call us in and ask us to look at the things as his committee was working on them. So it really did have an interesting effect in showing me that they're giving us some loose things that they want to accomplish that really are a collection of everybody's ideas thrown in this pot. And what they're looking for is a creative way to interpret that to bring a goal to fruition, rather than following each thing.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yep.
We have time for
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Want to get your take on standardized testing and its role?
Big issue, isn't it?
Just a little bit.
From a teacher's perspective, I think that we have a lot of work to do to change the perception of standardized testing. I don't have any objection to it once in a while, but I do have an objection to how frequently it's given and from what source that assessment originates and how it's then interpreted back and has to do with the teacher's salary. You know, the teachers are dealing with whoever comes to them on a daily basis, and part of the problem with all these assessments is that they're all online. What happens if your systems go down? What happens if somebody's absent? What happens if you have a blizzard? You know, there are so many variables that I really think that standardized testing needs to be reconsidered in its delivery, so that the goal of being able to identify state of Indiana achievement is put into a reasonable kind of thing that can be manipulated to fit the needs of the local institutions, rather than the delivery agency being the king.
We want to give you time to ask us any
Oh,
questions
okay.
that you would like to ask. And
Well-
hopefully can answer them.
Well, thank you. The one that I'm particularly interested in is I noticed in your strategic plan about international education and giving K-12 opportunities for achieving international education in some fashion. Obviously, we can't have the little kids going on a study trip that involves them leaving their parents. But how? And I've noticed through the minutes that you achieved that through curriculum, through field trips, and so on and so forth. But specifically, how is it going in middle school? What do you do there? Because that really is the time when we get them or we lose them.
Well, it's a little bit problematic for a variety of reasons. One, the state funding continues to
Yeah.
increase, so we don't have the funding to fully fund the strategic plan like we saw it 4 years ago. The second piece of it is what it's turning out to be is more opportunities of teachers taking kids on extended trips, whether it's junior high, high school, to have learning opportunities in other countries. And three, we have a real big facilities issue right now with regards to, we need to do more with opening up and having more space, more educational opportunities so that we can bring international flavors, if you will, into our schools. And we're so regimented right now with everything going on with ISTEP and with the other mandates that it's really shrinking what we really need to be doing. And so we're trying to push back on that. But I think the long-term approach to it is that we want to create facilities that are going to allow us some international opportunities through technology, through being able to have class sponsors between, say, Belgium and Cumberland, through France and the junior, senior high school. And we have some teachers doing that, but we want to expand that even more. We've got to address our facilities to do that.
Interesting answer, because it certainly brings in several of the questions that you've asked.
Yeah.
Me, you know, how do you feel about the standardized assessment? Not good. So, yeah, well, good luck. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that it hasn't overwhelmed and caused the district to just think, because to me, that's really a huge issue. The kids are really going to navigate in global society and
Yes,
need to be ready for that.
Well, my question has been, will still always be, what does the results of ISTEP tell you about our kids compared with the rest of the
Right.
United States, the rest of the world? Tells you nothing.
That's right.
So why are we spending $100 million?
And all the time,
Right.
not only money, but all the time as well. I agree. And I think there are other assessments that give us those, can my students read? Can they think? Can they reason? I think there are other kinds of assessments that do that, so. Okay,
Okay, anything else we can answer for you?
I think that'll do it.
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much. The process will be that you may have read that we will vote as a board next Wednesday in our regular board meeting. And we'll appoint someone, and then the following day, the following morning, we'll have the swearing in of the new candidate.
Okay.
And I do think, too, one thing that as well, that we do have board training, and we have the ability, you will have the opportunity to meet with several different folks that will help get you up to speed should you be our selection. So, okay, thank you very much. We thank you.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Thank
Very,
you.
very good.
I enjoy it. Good luck.
All right, thank you very much.
It's an important thing you're doing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh, this is what I've been talking about.
Okay, you lived in this block.
Everyone, this is Doug Masson. This is our school board, and we'll let everyone introduce themselves.
Very good.
Put you here.
Okay.
Thank you. Welcome, and I don't know that we've introduced ourselves to the last candidate. We have name tags.
I think everyone knew everyone.
Yeah, that may have been, but go ahead, Tom, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Tom Schott, thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming. I'm Brad Marley.
And I'm Alan Karpick.
Karen Springer.
Rachel Witt.
Good to meet you, Doug Masson.
Thanks for coming.
Nice to meet you.
Doug, nice to meet you, and thanks for taking the time and effort to apply. And we will go around the horn a couple times with questions for you. May have a couple follow-up questions from time to time.
Okay.
And then we'll certainly give you time to ask all the questions that we hope we can answer, and try to explain the process a little bit. So without further ado, Tom, we'll let you go ahead and get started.
You wrote in your cover letter, but verbalize for us if you would, just why you're here and what's your interest in the position.
Well, I'm here because there was an opening. I had no way of really knowing who would apply. I've got a certain degree of ego, I suppose, to think I've got something to offer the board, and I wanted to make sure primarily you had some solid choices. I think the school board's been doing good work, as is evidenced by just the success of the school, my kids' experience there, and so I want to make sure you had an option that would allow you to continue that work.
What is your view of public education's purpose?
Well, it's to, I mean, number one, educate kids, but the reason we educate them is so they can be productive citizens. I mean, you want them to be able to get jobs, but it's more than that. Too often, I think we hear people talking just strictly in terms of, are they going to be able to get a job or not? And that's clearly important, but, you know, you want them to be able to lead good lives. And I know the education I got at public schools has allowed me to pursue a variety of interests. It's given me the skills to think about, you know, just the issues that face any citizen. And so I think that good schools make good citizens turn around and make good schools. And the reverse is true. I think, I don't want to say bad citizens, but poorly educated citizens tend to create an environment where we have schools that struggle, and then that's a negative cycle. So I would hope to be part of this and continue the positive one we have here.
Thank you.
Tell me an experience of something that you've done that you're really, really proud of, and it can be in education or it can be in anything that you've done, experienced in your entire life.
That's tough, but I suppose that's why you get to ask the questions. I have a lot of stuff I'm proud of, and I can't guarantee I would go back to this one every time. The one that's jumping immediately to mind is my role as a soccer coach. The thing that makes me happy every time I go and help these kids practice is there were one or two kids on my soccer teams, and this is just GRSA, it's rec soccer.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not a big student of the game. I don't pretend to have any specialized knowledge in coaching, but I've got these two kids who came in and had no prior knowledge of the game, had no aptitude, but we kept working with them. We gave them a place where they could you know, participate, and over the years, they're some of my best players now, and besides that, they're really happy when they're playing. So, you know, I would like to think that translates to the school environment a little bit. I'm not going to get down in the weeds and teach because I don't have the background for it. I wasn't taught how to teach, but I like to think that sort of environment gives me some insight into what the teachers are dealing with when they are they have a variety of students with a variety of aptitudes and a variety of learning styles, and it's their job to give them the space and the tools they need to prosper.
If you could describe your personal experience and involvement with the West Lafayette Community School Corporation.
It's fairly limited in terms of, I know there are people who are much more active in the school corporation. My involvement has primarily been through my kids, and full disclosure, I live next door to Rocky, and so sometimes shoveling snow, I talk to him about what's going on, but mostly it's been through, you know, going on my kids' field trips and helping them with their homework and interacting with the teachers as they communicate back home.
And also, full disclosure, he and I never discussed this board vacancy or him applying or me recommending it.
I'm not sure whether he'd use it as a positive or a negative.
Yeah.
I'm just letting know he shovels the snow. I thought Teresa.
Got a story about that,
Keep that, yeah.
Hey, Doug, what is the biggest issue in your opinion facing West Lafayette School Corporation, and what solutions, if any, would you have?
Well, West Lafayette schools themselves, I think, are doing very well. Again, based on the public performance and then my kids' experience. I think their biggest challenge is probably the challenge that all schools face, and I think it's more on the state and the federal level. I think the closer you are to the classroom where decisions are made, the better things are going to be. And so right now we have an atmosphere where I don't think the General Assembly is really focused on preserving and promoting public schools as both institutions of learning and as the sort of glue that holds our community together. So, you know, obviously school board members have no authority over the General Assembly. They set the reverse. They have control over what you guys can do. But I think being an advocate to the various legislators in town and just generally about urging urging on the state level in particular that that they focus on the health of the public schools.
You will, if you're appointed, periodically be approached by patrons with comments, questions, complaints. Tell me how you deal with that.
Well, I think I get some of this as I'm the Tippecanoe County attorney, and so sometimes people will come to me with, issues that really aren't my decision to make. I can offer insight, I can flesh out the problem so I can then report to the board. I think my role as an individual board member when approached with that would be a lot like my role as an attorney when approached with that, in that I could talk to them. I would not purport to be making decisions for the board or committing to any course of action, but I could talk with them, find out their concerns, see if they've thought through the solutions and have some ideas, and communicate with the rest of you what those might be.
Senior Bob, if you were appointed, is that something you think you would continue, discontinue, and why would you make whatever decision you make?
I'd probably continue. The closer question is whether I would comment on West Lafayette school business in particular. My practice, and I've done this for 10 years, and it's a very conscious decision, is not to talk, I do a little bit, but not to talk much about local issues, because I have clients who are, disagree with me, and I get my professional hat on, and it really doesn't matter what I think personally when I've got my professional hat on. I'm going to represent my client, and I don't want that blog interfering with things. I think the West Lafayette School Corporation would be a similar matter. As a professional, I'm speaking for my client. Here, if I were a board member, I would be speaking for myself, but it probably causes unnecessary strife here at the local level. It's probably best if I don't use that as a platform, when I can come here to a meeting and say what's on my mind.
If you were appointed to join our school board, what would you hope to accomplish over the next year?
My ambitions are pretty modest. I would hope to learn about what it is you guys do and how you do it. Like I said, I'm not trying to join this board because I think changes are terribly necessary. I think a good job has been done. I want to learn how it is that we've been successful, and then come to understand the underlying structure better, so that when tweaks are necessary, I'm not undermining the foundation. I've seen public officials who come in and they're a little too ambitious, and they want changes that are good on their face, but they don't really understand how the underlying mechanics work, and so there are unintended consequences. So it'd mainly be learning about how you do things, and asking you guys where you need help and trying to participate there.
Can you describe a decision you made or a situation that you've been in where it ended up being a failure, and if so, maybe what you did to respond to that?
My glib answer is that this is bringing to mind in the context of my 9th grade decision to volunteer for the extemporaneous speaking portion of our speech team, and I went in there with no training, no understanding of what it was, and I couldn't talk. I just fell flat. It was flop sweat. So I guess I kept talking, and that's how I responded to that. But on a professional level, without going into attorney-client confidences, more recently I made a strategic decision to pursue a procedural defense before we got into the substance of a particular case, and that ended up not working, and so we wasted a lot of time, wasted a fair amount of money, and I felt pretty bad about that decision, but I was gratified that the board members I reported to had experience with me, and they didn't feel as bad about it as I did, and they trusted my decision-making, and they continue to support me. So I would like to think that that would help me as a board member when you have somebody with a track record that you trust, that they know they can use their best judgments, make mistakes, and you're not going to cut them off at the knees if they make one mistake.
If appointed to the school board, do you see this as a short-term or long-term?
Well, I guess initially a long-term, but one of the advantages of coming in at this juncture is that it is a year and a half left in the term, and if I'm not that good at the job, I can make the decision not to run for election. But, I mean, that's not how I see this. I see this as, like I said, my ambitions for the first year are really modest, to be learning. So I don't know that learning about it and then walking away is terribly useful. So I suppose I see the long term as learning and then contributing more and more as the years pass.
Describe what you'd do if the superintendent of schools came before the board with an item that wanted to be voted on that you disagree with. Describe what you would do.
Well, I suppose it would depend a little bit on when I learned about it. If it were earlier on in the decision-making process, there are often ways to interact, talk with the person, figure out, express, my reservations, see if there is a fix, see if those reservations are well-founded, first of all, and then see if there's some way to address them. And if not, if that wouldn't work, then as it came before the board, I think my inclination would be let it come to a vote, express myself as to why I didn't think it was a good idea, try and convince some of you folks, and hopefully vote it down.
Thank you.
What is your understanding of the role of the school board in our corporation?
Well, I think it's probably a lot like most boards in that you're taking a broader view of the policy. You're a citizen oversight check on the people who actually have to execute your policy. So, number one, you're setting broad-based policies. You're probably not trying to get too deep into the weeds because people who have professional experience with these things are the ones you're trusting to execute. You're looking after the budget because you're responding to the citizens. They want good schools, but they also want to know that their money's not being wasted. And I think you can give input to the educators, to the administrators who come to you, who are deep in the weeds, which is good because they know how to navigate there, but sometimes you lose the, I'm not sure if I'm mixing a metaphor here or not, but you lose the forest sometimes, and I think the board members can sit back a little bit and see the forest for the trees and give some response to the people who are now I am mixing metaphors, down in the trenches all the time.
We will mark you down for that.
Exceptional metaphor using.
Won't be.
How do you spell metaphor? I'll get to that. You talked about being a learner, and how do you go about learning? I mean, what's your style to learn something new, which this would be by definition experience? What's your learning style?
Well, there's a couple of them, and one is to have an immediate problem, and as I go about learning about the problem and the solutions to the problem, a lot of information comes my way. So a lot of times I'm called upon to work a case where I don't, background in that area. So for example, I had a pig case that went on for 5 years. I knew nothing about, raising swine, and you just plug away. You look at the legal issues you have to address, but in the course of that, you're learning about the confined feeding industry. So that's, just really solution-based learning where you're looking for the particular answer, but other stuff flows in on the, just while you're not looking. The other way is I get curious about a particular subject. I just go read about it. I talk to people somewhat, but I find that probably reading the stuff gives me the most insight. I've learned that I'm not as good of a student, just a pure taking notes and listening to a lecture. We take continuing legal education, and I'm horrible at that now. I used to be pretty good when I was in high school and junior high and whatever, but now I've got to get the credits, but I don't feel like I learned very much there.
Other questions or questions for us that you might have?
Yeah, I suppose Is there an area where you feel like you're weakest right now and you can use a particular skill set to help you improve?
Anybody want to answer that question?
You're the spokesman.
No, I'll speak. I don't know. I
Defer to the chairman.
I think that from a board standpoint, I think fresh, anyone that comes from a fresh perspective, which will give us, I think of the 4 candidates we've had tonight, we will get somebody with a fresh perspective. We've had a good blend of people that have been on the board for a while and some new people. So I think that it's important for people to be, to be good listeners and be in front, pay attention to what's going on, but also to understand what the role of a board member is. And I don't know that from our standpoint that we've been lucky that with our group that our group has worked hard. We try to keep track of how are we attending meetings, are we coming to meetings prepared. It's a very important part of this, and I think for the most part we've had a good track record. What are the decisions we've made we'll see if they stand the test of time, and I understand that. But so I'm not sure we have a specific need in terms of that. We just need engaged, passionate people, and people that are going to do what they say that they're going to do. And I think that's been I think with our group for the most part we've had that. I can speak for all of them. I can't always speak for myself there. But so yeah, I don't know that there's anybody else want anything else that I didn't add. Other questions, Doug?
Yeah, just from a nuts and bolts standpoint, how many committees do you tend to be on? How many nights a week, a month does that tend to have you engaged and out of the house?
Well, if you want to be out of the house, you can be out at any time. But no, we have, I should know, but maybe 12 to 15 committees. And they range from negotiations, discussion, foundation, community council, public schools foundation, and your expectation is typically to serve on 2 or 3 of those committees. And those committees can meet monthly. They can meet quarterly. Some don't meet, negotiations being an example, that meet when it's time for negotiations, and then they meet often during that period of time. So your commitment is we have at least 1 board meeting a month. Oftentimes we have work sessions, so we may have a second. We may have an executive session if there's an issue that we need to deal with from that standpoint. So it's a little bit hard to say in terms of actual commitment, but a lot of the board meetings the committee meetings can be at any time. Could be 4 o'clock in the afternoon, could be noon. I think one thing as a board that we do try to do, and Rocky is good with this as well, because we've had kids that are involved with activities. For the most part, it's Wednesday night, and that's the deal. But we have been flexible in terms of that if there's activities. But it's important that you're here and an important part of this. But you'll get a chance to do. And we also tried to move people around on committees so you can get a varied experience. You would certainly have a skill set that you may see some things that you'd like to do. And we try to do that. Whoever the board chair is the person that assigns that. But it's a collaborative choice or a collaborative decision. That standpoint.
I also because Rocky and Alan, they're very efficient meetings. I mean, you come prepared and everyone's prepared, and we get our business done. And we have the occasional laugh, usually at my expense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
a good use of time.
Try to do that because everyone here is busy, so that part is it by definition. I think, and that's kind of what I think makes our group good. Other questions? Anything else you can answer?
No, I think that's kind of what I had. I just, appreciate you looking into this, whether it's me or somebody else. It looks like, from what I read in the meeting minutes, you've got a good group to select from. So I think, whether it's me or somebody else, hopefully you've got a strong board going forward. So I appreciate you guys doing this.
Okay, thank you very much. The schedule will work as such, though, that we will have a board meeting next week, and we will make the decision at that board meeting and a vote to name the new board member. And then on the following morning will be the swearing in. Rocky said it's like 5 a.m. or something like that. No, we'll
There'll be coffee.
At 4:30.
So that's the process, and we will notify folks of what the decision is in the meeting next week. Okay, anything else that they didn't hit on? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Thank you. There we go.
Anybody else have?
How's the new
Clear
puppy?
enough.
Trying to house break 'em.
Yeah, we do. He's back. Oh, is that from, did you have the one from last week too? Or did that?
I scanned that and sent it to her.
I want to do that. Stole your
I know you
Okay,
did. That's why I went
this
down
is for,
there.
okay. Oh, that's, she already has it.
No, I scanned it.
Maybe it's something funky. Thank you all for your work.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, behave yourself.
Oh, you're gonna do me again?
Hey, I forwarded a request to Lindsay for WLSCF. I had to roll.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I don't think this is what you meant.
No, so I got that out.
We'll adjourn.
Thank you.
Hey, you're welcome.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, all. Behave yourself. Keep walking your puppy.
I signed my contract today, thanks for that too.
What's that?
I signed my contract today,
Oh,
thanks for
good.
that too.
Well, hopefully it was right.
Woo! See you later.
Yeah, contracts are great. Dave, good seeing you.
See you. Take care.
Behave yourself.
Right.
Keep your writing going.
Okay.
Put mine at the back and we'll adjourn.
How JD was, you know?
JD was Monday and they lost August all day. Went and watched. 20s.
Consider our work session adjourned. No, everybody's here. And thank you for everybody.
Good questions, all.
Thank you, yes, thank you very much.